Welcome to Thinkin' Bits, where tech meets business innovation.
Getting internet beamed down from space. Sounds crazy, right?
Well, in Kenya, it's becoming a reality, and it's shaking things up big time.
I'm talking about Starlink, Elon Musk's ambitious project to bring internet to every corner of the globe, even Mars eventually.
And it's not just about the tech, though it is pretty mind-blowing, those tiny satellites zipping around the planet.
Yeah, it's like something out of science fiction. But the real drama here is how it's turning the Kenyan tech scene upside down.
Exactly. We're talking about a major clash of the titans, with Starlink going head-to-head with Safaricom.
Safaricom, for those not familiar, is basically the internet in Kenya. They've had a monopoly on the market for years.
I wouldn't say monopoly, but they do have the lion's share, over a third of all internet subscriptions. So Starlink coming in, it's a big deal.
Huge. Okay, before we get to the battle royale, let's back up a bit. How does this whole Starlink thing even work? Because, seriously, internet from space.
Right. It does sound a bit wild. It's all about low Earth orbit satellites, or LEOs. Basically, these satellites are much closer to Earth than traditional ones.
Okay, so shorter distance, meaning?
Faster speeds, way lower latency.
Yeah.
That's crucial for things like, video calls, online gaming, anything where that lag really matters.
Makes sense. So for our listeners in Kenya or anyone struggling with slow internet, this could be a game changer. But we all know in the tech world, it always comes down to
Price.
bingo. And that's where things get really spicy in Kenya. Starlink entered with a bit of a bang.
They did. Initially, their prices were pretty steep, out of reach for a lot of Kenyans.
Right, I remember that. But then they pulled a major power move.
They slashed prices dramatically.
Seriously, we're talking about making their service significantly cheaper than the competition, including, you guessed it, Safaricom.
Think 50 gigs of data for just over $10 a month. It was a bold strategy.
Bold. And you know what? It worked. Starlink subscriptions in Kenya, boom, up tenfold in months.
Tenfold. That's not just a nudge to the market, it's an earthquake.
And Safaricom felt the tremors.
Oh, they did. But how they responded, that's a whole other story.
So Safaricom, this giant of the Kenyan telecom world, they didn't just take this lying down, did they? What was their play?
It's interesting, actually. At first, they kind of brushed it off, like Starlink was this little blip on the radar, no big deal.
I bet that didn't last long.
Not with those subscriber numbers skyrocketing. Safaricom had to react, and they did, big time.
Lay it on me. What'd they do?
First, they went big on their fiber optic network, announced a massive upgrade, talking 5 times faster speeds.
A direct shot at Starlink's whole selling point.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
But they didn't stop there. They started raising concerns about, as they called it, regulatory imbalance. They were basically saying Starlink was playing by a different set of rules, not being held to the same standards as local providers like themselves.
Give me some specifics. What were they complaining about?
Licensing fees were a big one. And spectrum allocation, who gets to use which airwaves. Their argument was, hey, we've been investing in Kenya's infrastructure for years, following all the rules, and Starlink just swoops in.
Sounds like a classic case of an established player feeling the heat. But were their concerns valid?
It's tricky. On one hand, Safaricom did invest heavily in building out Kenya's internet, and they have a point about local regulations, but it also felt a bit self-serving, like they were trying to use regulation to stifle the competition.
They even suggested that Starlink should have to partner with local companies, right?
They did, which, conveniently, would have given them a say in how Starlink operates. Almost like they wanted to have their cake and eat it too, especially when...
Go on.
Well, at the same time they were crying foul about Starlink, Safaricom announced their own partnership with another satellite internet provider, AST Space Mobile.
So on one hand, satellite internet is unfair, and on the other, we're launching our own. A bit hypocritical, no?
You could say that. But look, for the average person in Kenya, this isn't just about corporate maneuvering. It's about their internet, their connection to the world.
And how has Starlink's arrival landed with them? What's the word on the street? So we've got Starlink shaking things up, Safaricom scrambling to respond, but how does this impact the average person in Kenya? What are people saying?
It's a mixed bag, really. There's definitely a buzz, a sense of, wow, is this finally it? Are we getting faster, cheaper internet?
I can imagine after years of limited options, a new player comes in, promises the world.
Exactly. And it's not just about the speed, though that's huge, obviously. It's the idea of an alternative to Safaricom. They've been the only game in town for so long.
Right, so Starlink represents competition, and competition usually means better deals for the consumer.
You got it. But of course, not everyone's sold. There's some hesitation, skepticism too.
What are people hesitant about?
Well, some just aren't sure about trusting a whole new provider, especially one tied to, Elon Musk. He's a bit of a polarizing figure, to say the least.
That's putting it mildly. So concerns about data privacy, that sort of thing.
For sure. And then there are the more general worries like, can Starlink actually deliver on all these promises long term? Is this sustainable?
Okay, so some healthy skepticism. Anything else? What about Safaricom's track record? They've had some controversies, right?
Yeah, we can't ignore that. Those accusations of throttling internet speeds, especially during sensitive political times.
You mean slowing things down during protests, elections, to control the flow of information?
Exactly. Now, Safaricom denies it, but those accusations have stuck with people. And it's created this climate where, for some, Starlink isn't just about better internet, it's about freedom.
Freedom from what they see as censorship, control.
Bingo. It's almost symbolic, this outside force coming in, potentially breaking down barriers.
We even saw a high-profile example of that, didn't we? The governor of Moranga County telling people to choose Starlink over Safaricom.
Oh, yeah, that tweet was huge. Ignore Safaricom. I mean, that's a pretty clear message. And it shows you how this goes way beyond just, which company offers the best deal.
It's about power dynamics, access, who gets to control the flow of information, big stuff. So where do we go from here? What's the future hold for this whole saga?
Honestly, it's a nail-biter. Starlink's already shaken things up, that's for sure. They've forced Safaricom to step up their game, which is a win for consumers. But the bigger picture, that's still up in the air.
So a win for internet users in Kenya, for now, at least. But this brings up issues that go way beyond Kenya, right?
Absolutely. This whole satellite internet game, it's a global shift. Who controls this technology? Who benefits? How do we regulate it? These are questions we're all going to be facing.
And those are questions we'll be keeping an eye on right here on the Deep Dive. But for now, listeners, if you want to dig deeper into the Starlink and Kenya situation, we've got some great articles linked in the show notes.
And hey, if you're on social media, search that hashtag Starlink Kenya hashtag. It's a wild ride. People are fired up, sharing their experiences, debating the future of internet in Kenya.
It's a real-time conversation, and it's fascinating to watch unfold. Because that's what this all comes down to, isn't it? Technology's impact on people, on societies, the power of connection or the lack of it. We've just scratched the surface here, folks. So keep exploring, keep asking questions, and we'll catch you on the next Deep Dive.